If you've ever wanted to start reading the EU but find yourself overwhelmed by the choices, then this video is for you. Here are my top 5 recommendations for entry points into the Star Wars Expanded Universe. If you have seen at least episodes 1 through 6, all 5 of these recommendations are going to be great starting off points for you. At number 5, we have Knights of the Old Republic. This story has everything a Star Wars fan could ever want. It's Jedi versus Sith, Army versus Army, Republic versus Empire, with unique stories and twists that make it a very enjoyable story. It's a great way to jump into the Old Republic era, set nearly 4,000 years before George Lucas's movies. Knights of the Old Republic is also a great entry point for gamers. It's a relatively low time commitment, it's not going to take up weeks to beat it. The only thing that came before it that it does reference is the Tales of the Jedi comics. These are only briefly mentioned, characters like Exar Kun, Marka Ragnos, the Sith War, stuff like that. However, the Tales of the Jedi comics are not required in order to understand and enjoy the game. Knights of the Old Republic is also a very accessible game, originally released on Xbox and PC. You can also play it today on Steam, and you can even play it on Switch. You can even play on your phone, as Knights of the Old Republic is available in both the Apple Store and Google Play Store. And if you're into comics in the Old Republic era, Tales of the Jedi isn't a bad place to start either. As an alternate starting game, I would also recommend Bounty Hunter. This is set during the prequel era, delves really deep into Jango Fett, a little bit about Mandalore, and you see some really cool things that follow up with the Phantom Menace leading into Attack of the Clones. A great companion for Bounty Hunter is the Open Seasons comic. You can actually unlock issue 2 in the game, you can read it in the game. This takes place before Bounty Hunter does, showing how Jango Fett was adopted by the Mandalorians, how he was betrayed, and how he became a Lone Ranger bounty hunter. Coming in at number 2, which is usually number 1 on most people's lists, but for me it's going to be Heir to the Empire. Though it wasn't the first publication in the Expanded Universe, Heir to the Empire is credited with popularizing it. The story picks up 5 years after Return of the Jedi, following our heroes Han, Luke, Leia, Lando, Chewbacca. We see Mon Mothma, Admiral Akbar, and a resurgent empire led under Grand Admiral Thrawn. This is a great place to start if you want to jump right into the New Republic era right after Return of the Jedi. It is also essential reading for just about everything in the EU set after this book. So if you want to go further into the New Republic era, the New Jedi Order era, the Legacy era, Heir to the Empire and the Thrawn trilogy as a whole are a must-read. Alternatively, there are comic adaptations by Mike Baron that I would highly recommend if you want a more visual version of the story. It is an abridged version of the story, so there are going to be some things that you miss if you only read the comic adaptation. Doing both is also a lot of fun, but this is an alternative if you're interested. And if you're on the fence about whether or not you want to commit to a whole trilogy, I highly recommend the fan film adaptation by Darth Plagueis. He takes you through all 32 chapters of the novel, and he's currently working on Dark Force Rising. It only takes about 4 hours of your time, and if you're interested, I'd go back and reread the novel and then go into the rest of the trilogy. An alternative entry into the New Republic era is going to be the X-Wing series. The X-Wing series is divided into a quadrilogy by Michael Stackpole, a trilogy by Aaron Alston, and then there are 2 other loose novels that take place after the Thrawn trilogy and then later after the Jedi Academy trilogy. The X-Wing books are great if you want to follow a long military campaign featuring ordinary heroes, a little bit of Jedi stuff in the mix. These books feature great original heroes like Corran Horn, led alongside Wedge Antilles. Coming in at number 3 are the Republic comics. This is going to be the best place to start if you are a comic book fan. Features expanded stories on some of the most legendary characters of the prequel era that you didn't see much of in the movies, like Aurra Sing, Quinlan Vos, Ash'arad Het. The series begins just before the Phantom Menace and goes all the way through and just past Revenge of the Sith, so it really encompasses the entire prequel era. The Republic comics are a bedrock of the Clone Wars multimedia project, but you really do need to start all the way with issue 1, because many of the campaigns in the Clone Wars that feature these characters do call back to events that happen in between episodes 1 and 2. Republic is also a great springboard into other comic book series. Dark Times is almost a direct sequel. The Empire comics have some parallels, such as returning to Jabim, and some characters from these comics appearing in those. And if you want to read the Rebellion comics, you really should read the Empire comics first. The Republic comics also have events and characters that spring all the way into the Legacy comics. And even though this is a longer series, might take a little bit more time to collect all the physical issues. Digital, I guess, isn't as much of an issue. This is the best place for comic book readers to start. If you're looking for something a little bit shorter, just a single trade paperback to get you started with your EU comic book reading, I can recommend the Darth Maul comics from 2000, which are included in this omnibus here. Or if you're more interested in the Clone Wars era, I can recommend the General Grievous comic by Chuck Dixon. And coming in at number 2 is the novel Darth Plagueis. There's really no better book to start with if you're a prequel fan. The Darth Plagueis novel both ties in with dozens of other things set in this time period, and is also a great entry point into those things. We see the likes of Darth Maul Shadowhunter, the aforementioned Darth Maul comic, even Bounty Hunter gets referenced in this, Jedi Council Acts of War, and dozens of other small bits and short stories all tie into this novel right here. The novel begins with Darth Plagueis near the end of his apprenticeship under Darth Tenebris, all the way through and into The Phantom Menace. And Darth Plagueis is just as much a Darth Sidious novel as it is Darth Plagueis, so if you love dark side stuff, if you love going into villain characters, if you love all of the political machinations, all of the behind the scenes conniving, the backstabbing, the conspiracy, this novel is a wonderful entry. There's a reason why this is on almost everybody's top 5 or top 10 list, and this is going to come in at number 2 for me. Also be sure to check out the fan film adaptation by Everest Productions, who is 2/3 the way through adapting the novel. Another great alternative, which does get referenced some in Darth Plagueis as well, is the Darth Bane trilogy. The Darth Bane trilogy begins 1,000 years before the George Lucas movies, and shows how did the Sith transition from a vast army all the way to just 2. Something else to consider whenever you're thinking about what you're going to read and where you're going to start is the Darth Bane trilogy does have references to the first Knights of the Old Republic game, and Darth Plagueis is referenced in Darth Bane, so if you want to go in kind of chronological order, you can do that, or you can start with Plagueis and sort of unravel the mystery backwards. Both are completely viable options and not a bad way to start at all. And coming in at number 1, my personal top recommendation, Shadows of the Empire. Alright, I'll admit I'm a bit biased. I'm working on a fan film of Shadows of the Empire, but there's a reason I chose that one to be the first adaptation that this channel worked on. Shadows of the Empire is episode 5.5. You don't even need to see Return of the Jedi to understand the content of this book. It's built on A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back and nothing more. Of course, there's lots of tie-ins, Easter eggs, and foreshadowing into Return of the Jedi, but this novel right here, there's really no better starting point than this one. You get introduced to characters like Prince Gingerbeard, and you see a lot of conflict between Vader, the Emperor, and this new villain. We see Luke transition from being defeated at the end of Empire Strikes Back all the way to the confident Jedi that we see walk into Jabba's palace. Shadows of the Empire is also great because it is a multimedia project. There's a comic, there's a video game, the novel, and so many other things like role-playing games, micro-comics, short stories, toy lines. Shadows of the Empire is a massive multimedia project, so whatever medium you like most, whether it's games, comics, books, role-playing games, short stories, there's something there for everybody to start with. The novel is certainly the most complete version of the story, but there's certain things in the comics like how Vader has this agent named Jaxxon that he sends on a personal mission. We see Boba Fett really struggle to get Han Solo all the way to Jabba's palace, as every other bounty hunter in the galaxy wants to collect that reward and take it from him. And in the video game, we follow the character of Dash Rendar, an outlaw with no loyalties to anyone but himself, but nonetheless finds himself helping the rebellion. It is also a very solid standalone story. You don't really need to read Shadows of the Empire to understand New Jedi Order or the X-Wing books or the Thrawn trilogy. It kind of stands alone. There is a sequel called Shadows of the Empire Evolution. It is a comic book written by the same author, and Prince Gingerbeard does get mentioned lots of other places. He's in the Bounty Hunter Wars trilogy, the Coruscant Knights trilogy, the Han Solo trilogy, and Shadows of the Empire is a great introduction to him. However, it's not essential to understand everything else in the story. Before we wrap up, I have a couple more honorable mentions. Shatterpoint is a great standalone novel. All you need to see to really understand this book is episodes 1 and 2, follows Mace Windu as he goes back to his home planet and confronts his master, who seems to have gone a bit rogue during the Clone Wars. It is a great standalone novel, and there's characters introduced in this book that do show up later, like in Shadows of Mendor, the Coruscant Knights trilogy, and so on and so forth. Alternatively, there is the Kenobi novel. This is a great follow-up to Revenge of the Sith, really focusing on just one character. It's a true Western in every respect. Some people will say this is a little bit of a slower novel, and that's true. There is no giant action scenes, but if you want to see how Obi-Wan deals with the trauma of the events of Revenge of the Sith, how he protects an infant Luke, and even though he's a Jedi in exile, he just can't stop himself from helping people. And then there's the aforementioned Han Solo trilogy. If you love Han Solo and you want to see him in Imperial service, leave Imperial service, how he meets Chewie, how he gets the Millennium Falcon, and how his ties to the Rebellion go back even before A New Hope, this is an excellent story to go into. Like I mentioned before, there is some Easter eggs with Hutts and Prince Xizor and other things that do take place in the EU before this book came out. Not only is this one trilogy, there's also a second trilogy. The second Han Solo trilogy, which is technically the first, this one's the second, I have on the bookshelf right here behind me. This one is written by A.C. Crispin, the other one is written by Brian Daley. The first Han Solo trilogy was actually some of the first EU that was ever written, with the first book coming out in 1979. They are a bit whimsical and cheesy by modern EU standards, however A.C. Crispin went above and beyond. There's actually a few time jumps in this book, and she actually marks on the page, hey, this is where Han Solo at Star's End takes place. Hey, this is where, you know, this other book takes place. And so she does a great job of doing that. And so you can actually read all 6 back to back to back. The original Han Solo trilogy is quite shorter, just based on the page count. And so you really could read all 6 together if you want. It's a great experience. I do highly recommend it. All right, so that wraps up my top 5 and a few bonus recommendations. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, subscribe, and if you want to support the channel, consider becoming a member on Patreon. Your investment goes directly into the Shadows of the Empire fan film project, helping to get all of the assets, software, and hardware needed in order to make a high-quality adaptation of one of the best stories in the expanded universe. Thank you all for watching, and until next time.
May the Force be with you.